Good morning, friends. We're here on Facebook Live with Congressman Duncan Hunter this morning. Thank you so much for being with us. Of course, you are announcing your re-election campaign that starts officially tomorrow, correct?
No, it's been on.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
You have a few months to file, so
Sure,
it's not like a deadline. The deadline's in March at some point, I think.
All right, well, it's great for you to sit down with us this morning. I appreciate it. Now, he was just in the studio, and we were asking all sorts of questions in regards to kind of the top news that's going on right now. Gun control is a big topic, and we talked briefly about the president's tweet this morning saying that he, appreciated the idea of raising the age that you can buy guns legally. And you hit on a really important topic, I think. People look at that and go, well, that's an easy way to do something, but it's not such an easy answer because you talked about, being 18, you're allowed to serve the military.
You can vote, you can serve in the military. We ask you to go fight for your country. You can go overseas and die at 18 or 19 years old, and you can't then come home and buy a rifle.
It's an interesting predicament.
It's kind of strange. So there has to be some consistency there. Either raise the age to 21 for everything, like it is now in California, it's 21 years old to vape, to buy beer, to buy cigarettes, right? But 18 years old to vote and join the military. So it's an interesting dichotomy that it needs to be consistent, though. So to me, it's not so much of a gun control issue as it is a violence issue in America, right? There's things you can do to make schools safer, and I think arming teachers that are former law enforcement, former military folks, I am for that 100%. I have two kids in high school, one in 6th grade. I would actually argue that it's incumbent upon you, if you're trained tactically, to know how to shoot a weapon and how to fight, frankly. If you're law enforcement or military, it's incumbent upon you to protect my kids. I want you to carry. Yeah. In fact, you should have to tell me why you choose to not want to be able to protect my kids in the school if there's a school shooting, when you're well equipped and trained to be able to do so, right? So that's one thing that gets me. I mean, yeah.
We both have middle schoolers. Should middle school physically look different? I mean, should our schools look and
No, because I was thinking about this too. There's no way to stop people from getting onto campuses. I went to Granite Hills High School in El Cajon. The only fences are around the sports facilities. That's it. There's no other fences around the entire part of the school. So it's wide open, right? I don't think you can make schools impenetrable. You'll have kids that fake that like they're other kids. They can climb fences. So what you have to do is you have to have good pushback on the schools, right? None of these, nobody's getting shot in these school shootings after an armed presence arrives. I think the stat is actually in the last 20 years there hasn't been a single fatality in any mass shooting after an armed response. Right? So all it takes, and these kids aren't trained by the Navy SEALs, right? These are kids that are usually massively mentally ill or have major problems, and they walk up and shoot people. They aren't Delta Force. So if you have one person who knows how to fight back, it's going to be fairly easy to take down an unsophisticated 19 or 18-year-old shooter. Number two, there are applications now using our phones where you can send out an emergency distress beacon, basically, whether you're at a church or a school. You can send out, hey, bad things are happening here, and that message then goes out to the closest law enforcement folks. It doesn't matter whether they're sheriff, CHP, Border Patrol, Department of Interior, law enforcement, anybody who's trained to react to a shooter or trained to stop bad guys will then get this message on their phones and be able to respond instantaneously, even if they're at the 7-Eleven or they're just driving by. I think that's a good thing too, to increase response times.
I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment, but one of the things I hear a lot on Facebook and a lot from teachers is we are so overburdened already. There's so much we have to do in a classroom. Please don't make me make that choice, But are we talking about teachers specifically, or are you saying, no, we're just talking about people that are already trained that happen to be teachers at the same time?
Both, I would say. Start off with the ones that are trained already who want to carry on campus. You'll have teachers that don't want to carry that are trained. Right, and in those situations, if your school can't find anybody that wants to protect the children, then hire security. Then something like that. There's no other way to stop a person with a gun than somebody else with the gun.
What do you say?
That's why we go to war.
We're doing enough already in our classroom.
Well, I mean, if you want to look at the writ large problem here, it's loss of loving one another, loss of community. This 19-year-old kid Nicholas Cruz had been through hell with his mom dying. He was kicked out of after the lady he was living with stole his money. I mean, he had some major issues. He had no love in his life, no God in his life, and I think that's one of the things that leads to these things happening, is total lack of God now in our nation, and lack of love for one another, and lack of community. He had nowhere to go, it seemed like, and at the same time, everything he did was premeditated, from pulling the fire alarm to trying to escape with the kids. So he wasn't just some crazy guy who flipped out. He had a plan.
So here's where you and Trump agree. The president agree on the idea of arming people within the schools, but you disagree on the part where you raise the age. Is that something you'll oppose with the president?
I don't know, because he hasn't. I mean, the president can't just make these laws willy-nilly. Congress does, right? And he'll simply sign it. But I would like to take a look at it and see how you can serve the nation overseas at 18 years old, but you can't buy a gun when you come home at 18 years old. That seems backwards to me. So let's see if there's going to be exceptions for that. Maybe there are exceptions. Maybe if you're in the military, then you can be 18 or 19 years old and buy a weapon. If you haven't, then you haven't. But that's not fair either to people that don't want to join the military, right? So let's look at it. You know, we're going to have this debate. I think the most important thing is to have the debate and have it publicly, have it in Congress so people can see it. And that's the first step, is really talking about it. But at least we have a president right now that wants to do things, that does want to make changes, and has a couple of concrete steps of things that we can do to try to make sure this doesn't happen again. Or if it does, it's much less than 17 kids killed in adults.
Are there other areas where you and the president don't see eye to eye?
I haven't thought about that, actually. Probably not too many now.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Let's talk about your campaign a little bit.
Yeah.
So we've talked this morning, and you've talked several times about the investigation that's been ongoing. What doesn't the public understand? I mean, some of these issues seem like...
I think they understand it fairly well.
Okay.
From the local paper's point of view. I think they've written about 70 stories on it, all of them referring to their other stories. It's very simple. Money got spent out of my campaign, not by me. I then paid it all back, because you have what's called the Federal Election Commission, and they're the ones that oversee your campaign. They look at your reports every quarter, and I turn in reports every quarter that say, here's what I spent money on, here's how much money I was able to raise. I know how that works. My dad was in Congress for 28 years. I've been in for 10. I paid it all back, and then the Department of Justice here locally took over, right, about a year ago. And after I paid it back, after I told the FEC everything, after we did an independent audit that said, here's what's been going on. So beyond that, I don't know what they are doing. It's been over a year. I've not been contacted by them. I think it's a good thing, frankly, that it's been a year, but maybe not. I don't know. Right? You have to trust the system.
What are you going to tell, at some point, when you're running and you're conducting your campaign, how much of a distraction is that issue for you? Do you feel like you have to address it as...
No, I don't talk about it at all. The only people that ask about it are media folks that want to get ratings to talk about the big investigation. But no, I don't talk about it at all ever, and nobody asks about it, that they like what I'm doing in my job. I have 10 years of record to look at, and you can see what I've done over the last 10 years. So that's what people talk about. Border security, jobs, economy, military. Literally, that's what they talk about. But
it may feel like...
You got to get headlines
right,
here,
it may feel like the media is the only one that's talking about it, but I assume that your opponents will be talking about it a lot. What are you going to say to their...
Nothing. No, they can say whatever they want to. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to run like it's our first race, and we don't usually worry about our opponents anyway. Right? We just run on what I have done and what I'm going to do in the future, and that hasn't changed much. Right? The economy, we just passed these tax cuts were monumental. They're going to jump charge the American economy for the next 50 years. It's going to be awesome what's going to happen in this country, especially not necessarily Wall Street, but Main Street. Now that we're on equal footing with every other country in the world, it's going to be awesome what happens there. We're going to build the border wall. I'm going down today or tomorrow to the border to look at the different prototypes with the Border Patrol. The military finally got funded after years of inadequate funding. We just funded them finally fully about 2 weeks ago. That's a big deal. That's what I'm in Congress for.
Okay, quick question, and we'll wrap it up here. Tony Mendoza, this is kind of unprecedented for California. I'm hoping you'll weigh in. The legislature looking today on what kind of action that they're going to take against him for some sexual misconduct issues. This is unprecedented because he could be the first legislator in like over a century to actually be expelled. Do you think that's appropriate?
There was a lady legislator here in California too, I saw, that
right.
Sexually assaulted a bunch of guys too. I don't care if they get removed. If you've sexually harassed people or sexually assaulted them, then you shouldn't be in office. You shouldn't have a job, right? I mean, at least not the one you occupied when you did the assaulting.
Do you think things have changed much in Washington and even locally, politics-wise, because of the whole Me Too movement?
To an extent, I think people are simply more cognizant of men and women being different. Frankly, it's kind of put a little divide in things, right? But I'm still not one of the guys that's going to open up the doors because I'm meeting with a woman, as opposed to keeping them closed like I would when I'm meeting with anybody else. You know, I think people want to be more safe than sorry, but just don't sexually assault people, and then you'll be safe.
It seems
right?
simple enough.
If you don't do it, you'll be okay. Right? That's my lesson to everybody.
That's a good lesson for us to end on here. Anything you want to add that we haven't asked you?
No, thanks for having me on.